streak right now. Playoffs are just 2 games away. Me and Suneil are going to be breaking down Saturday's game, not yesterday's game, and talking about whether the 49ers have any issues heading into the playoffs. All after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
Welcome back, everybody. It's been a minute. I've got one of my guys, So Real Suneil, back. He's been busy. I've been busy, but we got to chop it up over the holidays. First, Suneil, how you doing? Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, man. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you as well, Rohan. It's been a long time, brother. So glad we got to get it together and get on a show together before, things get super busy again. So
Yeah, no, definitely. Real quick, got to give a shout out to the chat. 49ers Throwback, thank you for tuning in, as well as Terrador. Thank you for both tuning in. It's going to be a fun show. Obviously, the 49ers did win 37-20, extending their winning streak to 8 games on Saturday. That's obviously the main talking point. So we'll start there, Suneil. Initially, what did you think about the game, the way the 49ers won, and just give me your thoughts on that before we head into the main topics for today.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game overall, obviously, anytime you could get a win against a playoff caliber team like Washington is at the moment, you got to be happy with that, especially, with that final score being the way that it is. I think these are the type of games where you see certain things that definitely can be worked on. And, if you could have a learning experience and get a victory all at the same time, I think that's ideal, obviously. So definitely overall extremely happy with the victory. Like you said, eight game winning streak. That's nothing to sneeze about. That's really hard to do in the NFL, no matter what conference. Doing it all with doing it all with Brock Purdy, third string quarterback. I think that's amazing. So overall, pretty excited about the victory, and I know we're going to be talking about kind of some of the details of it moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Real quick, got to give a shout out to some of the other guys that popped in. Harold Murillo, obviously one of the regulars for Suneil. Thank you for tuning in. Merry Christmas to you as well. Spynick Danger, thank you for tuning in, as well as Last Second Sports, obviously Jesse. We're adjusting to a new setup. We're going to get that fixed soon, but at least we're not like Jesse's old haircut right now. So
Jesse always do be talking about people's hair. Jesse, not all of us are as inclined as you, my man. Give it up.
Yeah, man. And look, no hard feelings. Don't knock me out. I know you got a killer right hand. But talking about the 49ers and their performance, let's start off with Brock Purdy. Obviously, the talk of the town. You tweeted something out recently. We'll get to that a little later. But initially on Brock Purdy's performance against the Commanders, what did you think? Because 49ers put up 37 points on offense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, first half of the game, I did tweet in the first half of the game, the first half scoring for the 49ers in the 3 games that Brock Purdy has started have dwindled down. So first game against Tampa was 28 points. Then the next game against Seattle, I believe it was, was I think 14. And then last week was 7. So first half scoring usually is a testament to how the team is going to end up throughout the game. But second half, Brock Purdy came out, whatever changes they made in the locker room, obviously, ended up working out well. The offense was moving. He made some decent throws in the second half, and the team ended up, putting up the amount of points over 37 points at the end of the game. So, that's great to see. That's not something that's usually normal for the 49ers to be able to have that kind of explosion in the second half. So it's good to see that they are capable of that against the defense in Washington that is fairly good. I
Right.
think their defense is pretty underrated. And to give credit to Brock Purdy, excuse me, the 3 games that he has started so far, and including the game against Miami where he played most of the game, those are probably 4 of the tougher defenses that the 49ers have played all throughout the season. Miami, Tampa, New Orleans, not New Orleans, Seattle, not Seattle, but I guess, with Washington, three out of the 4 defenses that he played are fairly good in different arenas. So,
Right.
props to him that he's still able to put up the type of points that he's putting up, have the success that he's having against, defenses that are playoff caliber, to say the least.
Yeah, I think that that's fair to say. And when we talk about Brock Purdy, first half, I did think that it was a little disappointing in some areas. Now, did he get the opportunities that you'd normally expect to get in the first half? Not necessarily. Why? Washington they really dominated time of possession. They had a 17-play, 84-yard drive that spanned nearly 11 minutes. At the end of the first half, they nearly doubled the 49ers' time of possession. So they had the ball for a majority of the time. That resulted in the 49ers essentially only having 4 drives. I'm not counting the one kneel down, or sorry, the one handoff at the end of the first half. Only 4 drives in the first half. One was the interception on one play. Another, they were able to drive down the field, just not convert on 4th and 1. And then the other one was a 99-yard touchdown drive and then a punt, right? So overall, some mixed results from Purdy. I did think that there were a couple of places where it seemed like he was a little over aggressive, but apart from the one interception, which I thought was more so on Jennings, it was a pretty solid performance, pretty fine, not solid, but fine performance in the first half from Purdy. Second half, though, is where you saw the offense kind of turn up, capitalize more on opportunities. They had a touchdown on the initial drive, then a touchdown 2 drives later. And then after that, it was just score after score after score. It went touchdown, field goal, field goal, field goal, touchdown to end the game. So they just kept scoring, capitalizing on the Washington Commanders' mistakes. And so it was solid overall. Purdy has been up and down. He has definitely flashed. The athleticism is some part that is definitely a part of his skill set. And so I think he's definitely had his moments. He's had some struggles as well. We'll see how sustainable it is going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you mentioned the athleticism and just his mobility, I think, is a pleasant surprise. That's something that I didn't realize he had. I think his pocket awareness is better than I expected as well. Like he moves very well in the pocket. He feels where the pressure is coming from and is doing, his swim move is pretty nice. His little shoulder,
Yeah.
underneath is good, and he seems like he's pretty accurate throwing on the run as well and feels comfortable doing that. So there's a lot of things that he does that I like, and I think that all the things we mentioned is probably not even his best attribute. His best attribute, I would say, are his intangibles, his mentality, his ability to just stay in the moment, and his humility. He's just a likable guy. It's hard not to root for him. It's hard, obviously the story of Mr. Irrelevant and all that kind of stuff is built into this legacy that he's building. But he obviously is stepping up to the challenge. I also think maybe I try to put something, you mentioned the tweet, I try to put some things in perspective as far as the offense overall. And some Brock Purdy fans thought I was a hater, and it was no shade to Brock Purdy. It's just I think there's a lot of talk about the 49ers have found their guy and this is the guy of the future. Maybe they have. I just don't know if there are weaknesses that haven't necessarily led to any kind of huge issues for the 49ers quite yet, but they are there. And I think sometimes people just want to gloss by those. So,
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, speaking about that tweet, let's talk about it. Main reason for the 49ers offensive success. For those of you guys that obviously are following along, you've seen the 49ers seen an increase in several offensive statistics over the past few weeks. Purdy obviously has been playing their 3-0 with Purdy playing, had a 37-point outing today. Sorry, not today, on Saturday against the Commanders. The week before, 21 points. The week before, 35 points. The week before, 33 points. pretty solid scoring performances for the 49ers in those games. Now, what do you think is the main reason or main reasons for offensive success?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's gonna be a bunch of things, right? It's not just one thing, I would say, but we're talking about main. Like, if we're doing like a pie chart, what's the biggest percentage of the change? And for me, it's not that debatable. There's a trade that happened with the 49ers 2 days or 3 days before the Kansas City game. And CMC came in and was traded in the 49ers. You and I were actually, I think, some of the
Yeah,
first people that like talk about, the 49ers should do whatever they need to bring CMC. Is going to be a game changer. And there was a lot of people that were detractors of that. There was people that were like, yeah, if you could get CMC, but maybe not at a certain cost, the draft picks, all that kind of stuff. I think you and me were like, there's no cost. That's too much for a guy like CMC. He's going to be a game changer. And other than that Kansas City game where he didn't get a full week of practice, since CMC has had a full week of practice with the 49ers, they haven't lost.
right.
They're 8-0 since CMC has had a full week of practice with the 49ers. And they've gone from averaging 21 point something points per game to now over 28 points per game in that time span. And that's including the 21-point performance against Kansas City. You take that out, it's even a higher points per game average since CMC has been there. And it makes a lot of sense. Kyle Shanahan's offenses are predicated and built around the run game. He's never had a talent, probably ever, in his career, and that's offensive coordinator and arguably offensive coordinator, definitely as head coach of the 49ers, the talent of CMC, all pro level running back, running a run for or leading and run first offense. And you see what that offense is capable of when you have that. The ability of CMC to constantly need now on the defensive side, need a player to shadow him at all times, need, sometimes multiple players shadowing him. It just changes the whole, all the windows that are there for the offense. It changes what Kyle Shanahan is able to do. And it's not a coincidence that ever since CMC has been there, we're not seeing as regular these 3rd and 9, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14. Like now it's like 3rd and manageable. And the 49ers third down percentage has gone up quite a bit since CMC has been there. I think, and that's if Jimmy was quarterback, that's when Brock's been quarterback. That's when Debo's on the field. Debo's not on the field. Like a lot has changed since CMC has been there. So if we're doing the pie chart and where the majority of the success is going to, who should get the majority of the success, I think it's CMC. But obviously, Brock Purdy is there. Obviously, the offensive line playing the way that it is, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different contributors there. But to me, the biggest change and the winning streak started when that trade with CMC happened.
I think that's very fair. I mean, I remember when we were talking, CMC was one of the guys who we said, yeah, that's a guy who we'd want. I even said on the night of that I didn't think the trade value was as high as many people anticipated, given the 49ers draft status over the next 2 years. McCaffrey is a guy who can impact not only in the running game, but also the passing game. I've said his biggest threat is that receiving weapon of his because it forces defenses to account for that player and also allows for schematic changes, but makes a quarterback's life easier because he has a security, a safety blanket automatically in that check down for Christian McCaffrey, and a 7-yard 3rd and 7 can be attainable even with the check down. So to me, I think that Christian McCaffrey, hands down, has been the biggest addition. That's you said it yourself. 49ers, this 8-game winning streak, when did it come? It came right after that Christian McCaffrey trade. When did the offense start scoring 28 points a game? Right after the Christian McCaffrey trade. When did the yards per game start going into the top 5 in the NFL? After the Christian McCaffrey trade. The biggest disparity in the 49ers offense has been pre-McCaffrey, post-McCaffrey. We've written articles on it. You've seen it around. That's, I think, the biggest change the 49ers have had with their offense, which is why I deemed him their offensive MVP this year, despite him only being here for half the season. And we'll get to Pro Bowl in a little bit, but I thought he should have been a Pro Bowler. And so McCaffrey, I think, has been he's been huge. You can see on film, like Obviously, you can see with statistics, he's leading the 49ers in several categories, even up there in receiving yards. But the magnitude of the impact, which you see on film, where defenses are attracted to him, which opens up George Kittle, which opens up Brandon Ayuk, things like that. That's where you see, wow, this guy has a huge impact even when he's not even getting the ball. I think McCaffrey has single-handedly made the offense easier for the 49ers, both for Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. The second part of the main reason for the offensive success, I think it's the guy behind it all, Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan has done a good job scheming receivers open in the last few weeks. I mean, McCaffrey 100% helps with that, but Shanahan has used the identity of McCaffrey to find ways to scheme receivers open and make easy plays for his quarterbacks. The reason that Brock Purdy, not the reason, but one of the reasons Brock Purdy has found such success early on is because the throws are open. He's found several open receivers on a consistent basis, and that's something that you don't normally see. And so I think that those are the two main reasons why the 49ers are having the success that they are. But you also got to chalk it up to execution, because that was the one thing that was struggling for the first 7 weeks of this year. That's why they were 3-4, because plays were there. Shanahan has been doing this job for the entirety of the year. So if we're talking specifically about the shift, you talk about execution, because the play calling, in my opinion, has been there. But main reason, Christian McCaffrey. Agreed there.
Yeah, and I tweeted that. It's gone a little bit viral, and a lot of people are saying I say that tweet and it's hating on Brock Purdy, and that wasn't what I was trying to do with Brock Purdy. Even in the tweet, I say Brock Purdy deserves praise because he's playing well. And if we want to go into like the 8-game winning streak, the games that Jimmy has won in that streak and the games that Brock Purdy has won in this streak, Brock Purdy's points per game are significantly higher than Jimmy. So I'm not saying that Brock Purdy isn't adding to this offense. I think that his mobility, his at least willingness to throw the ball a little bit farther down the field to make some bigger plays is obviously making this offense more explosive. But my point, and I would challenge anybody that's looking at that tweet and saying, "Hey, Suneil, you're just a Brock Purdy hater." If CMC wasn't a part of this offense, would Brock Purdy be putting up the type of points that they're putting up right now? And then do the flip side of it. If Jimmy was the quarterback, if Trey Lance was the quarterback, and CMC was there, would they still be able to put up the same amount of points? I challenge anybody to tell me that one is true and the other is false, right? So I definitely think that any competent quarterback comes in, they're going to look much better with the offensive weapons that are there with CMC than vice versa, where Brock Purdy is making these players look better. I don't think that's necessarily
and the one thing I said right now, execution comes down to the players. Like, that's also a reason why the 49ers have had this huge change. And while Christian McCaffrey undoubtedly makes things easier for quarterbacks, there's still a level to a degree where the quarterbacks have to execute in this offense. You don't necessarily need to execute at a high level necessarily. We've seen the 49ers get away with it, but Purdy has executed at a high level, and that's why they're scoring nearly 30 points a game while he's on the field, because they're able to get that execution from him. Now, are they from open throws? Yes, but you gotta respect when that execution is there, when the execution previously hadn't necessarily been there on a consistent level.
And Rohan, what was the one thing that we were saying about Jimmy before he unfortunately got injured? He was on a streak of 0 interceptions, right? And did he all of a sudden become this quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over? This guy who just learned to make better decisions and all this stuff in his like whatever year it is of him in the league? Or is there a guy in CMC that makes the game a lot easier for the quarterback position? And like I said, this isn't me elevating the impact of what CMC is doing to this offense isn't to detract away from Jimmy, isn't to detract away from Brock Purdy. Obviously, they're playing the way that it is, but to deny or to ignore the fact that CMC is making every quarterback that's playing in this offense look like the perfect quarterback for this offense, come on.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
All right, let's get to some of y'all's questions because I see a couple of interesting ones in the chat. Real quick, Harold, he asked if playoffs were today, 49ers play the Cowboys, correct? No. So, Harold, the Cowboys are currently the 5 seed. The 49ers won't play the Cowboys in the first round, almost certainly. The Cowboys seem locked into the 5 seed. They're 2 games up on the 6th and 7th seed. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers currently are the 4 seed. The 49ers are 4 games up on the Buccaneers. So they can't drop. The Cowboys don't seem like they'll drop. So right now, the 49ers would play the New York Giants, who are the 6th seed. If they were the 2nd seed, they'd currently play the Washington Commanders. But there's a ton to go. There are, I think, 5 teams still in the hunt, with several teams inching just 1 game behind, like the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. The Seahawks are still in the race as well. So a lot to go down with the last 2 weeks. Some matchups even between teams for that final 2 spots. So
yeah, and Carolina still has a chance
Carolina's
of
still in too. Yeah,
to get the
I think
division over to
if
Tampa Bay.
they win this week, they've got a good shot because they play Tampa Bay this week.
Right.
Second question from 49ers Throwback. Do you think Kyle Shanahan is trusting Brock Purdy? He didn't trust Jimmy Garoppolo. What's kind of your take on the trust factor from both quarterbacks?
Yeah, I don't know if so. Here's the thing. I think one thing that we and I've been learning this through guys like you, guys like Jack, guys like Jesse, who do game tape and game film breakdown weekly. Is I don't know if Kyle Shanahan didn't trust Jimmy or if Jimmy didn't didn't take the options that were there that were like more explosive plays. And what I mean by that is it seems like Kyle Shanahan is always layering all of his plays. So there's a obviously like a safety net route. There's a low, medium, and then long range, right? And Jimmy just seems to be more content with the closer routes, right? So he's throwing less air yards. That's a big thing that we always talk about. Whereas Purdy, I don't think the play calling has changed. I think it's just the decision making has changed. Where Purdy is now willing to throw the ball down the field a little bit further. But those plays are obviously the plays that really stand out, right? Those touchdowns that go for 20 plus yards, 40 yards, whatever the case may be. But in reality, when you look at the majority of Brock Purdy's throws, they're very similar to what Jimmy does. In fact, he probably throws even a lot shorter than Jimmy a lot of times. When you look at the actual chart, I know Jesse sent something to me where, some stat where actually Brock Purdy's air yard attempts per pass is actually lower than Jimmy Garoppolo's. So it's just he has been every now and then taking a shot down the field that has been hitting. And he's able to hit those down the field open receivers, whether it be a wide open Kittle or a Brandon Ayuk or whatever the case may be. And those are the plays that are really standing out. So players are maybe saying, hey, Kyle Shanahan is giving him the reins to kind of throw the ball deep where he wasn't with Jimmy. Brandon Ayuk is open 90% of the time on those deep routes. Jimmy would just never throw it to him. And so I think that it's just more Brock Purdy is willing to take those shots, whereas Jimmy was more reluctant to take those shots. And I think that's where it may look like Kyle Shanahan trusts Purdy more. But I think in reality, it's more just the decision-making is different from these two quarterbacks.
I think that what you said is fair. I mean, like you said, I've watched the film. I don't think there's been necessarily a trust change in either quarterback. In fact, I think the play calling's been fairly similar for both quarterbacks. The only difference is one quarterback is hitting the reads that Kyle Shanahan prefers because they are open more downfield, while the other quarterback chose not to throw them as consistently. Garoppolo, it's not that Garoppolo didn't choose to throw the deep ball at all. He threw it. He just threw it inconsistently and missed the read at times when it's there. There are shot plays in this offense designed to get the ball downfield. Why are those shot plays implemented? Because then you can work all 3 levels of the field on offense. You're not as strapped offensively, and you can also work your run game. Brock Purdy, he doesn't care about not he when that throw is available downfield and it's open, he's going to throw it. He doesn't have necessarily the requisite arm strength to fit in tight windows, but when that throw is open to his standard, he is going to throw the football, which is the difference between the two quarterbacks at the moment. I don't think that there's necessarily a lack of trust. I think Garoppolo, while people like to point out, oh, Kyle doesn't trust Jimmy, there are certain situations where that's true. You'll see a little more conservative style, more normally on fourth downs. But I think in terms of pure play calling on first, second, and third down, it seems similar in terms of the trust level because the play calling is very similar. It's just you're getting different outcomes and different execution because one quarterback is willing to make some other throws that the other quarterback chose to be a little more conservative with. I think that that's the main thing. I've pointed it out since week 3, how there have been several downfield opportunities when Jimmy Garoppolo has missed it. I also think he did get a little better at it once Christian McCaffrey entered the fold because he doesn't necessarily have to be as conservative, knowing that his conservative option is always going to be a walk in the park. So that's kind of my thought process on it. I don't think that the trust level is necessarily different. I just think it's the execution that has been different that makes it look like the trust level might be different. Because this is an argument that people posed earlier in the year. Kyle Shanahan doesn't trust Jimmy Garoppolo. Remember when Garoppolo made those comments about, oh, wow, this is the most free I've ever played after he came in week 2 against the Seahawks in relief of Trey Lance? We saw the next week, Kyle Shanahan dialed up how he normally would for Garoppolo. Garoppolo kept missing him. And I'm not saying that that's what I hold the standard to Garoppolo for because he played very well in that stretch since McCaffrey came. I just don't think that this argument about not trusting Garoppolo is relevant.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Well said.
Now, another comment from 49ers throwback. Purdy and Kittle seem to have a connection. For reference, the duo connected for 6 passes, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns on a top 8 targets this past week, this past game. So yeah, that connection's there. I guess Jimmy, I'd assume he meant Jimmy was holding Kittle back. I even heard this with Grant Cohn and Ryan Hensley. What's kind of your thought process about the relationship between Purdy and Kittle, how they're getting Kittle involved, and really Kittle's output so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things are playing a role in this that I think is the reason. I mean, let's just put it in perspective. You know, the first however many games Kittle has been on the field, I think he's played they're 8-1. They were 11-4, so 15. I think he's missed a couple games. So let's say he's played 13 games. The first 11 games, he scored 4 touchdowns. The last 2 games, he's also scored 4 touchdowns. So clearly he's getting more touchdowns with Brock Purdy than anybody else. But let's put things in perspective again, right? Stats on their own sometimes aren't painting the true picture. Number 1, Brock Purdy is a rookie quarterback. What do we say a rookie quarterback's best friend is, no matter what the team is? It's always the tight end, right? The tight end is always the safety net for any rookie quarterback. It's the easiest read. They're usually matched up against someone that's either not as fast as them in a linebacker or not as big as them in a corner. So that they usually, a tight end has a good matchup for a inexperienced quarterback to easily make that read. And especially when you have the talent of Kittle, that's an all-pro, probably the only tight end that's better than him in the league, arguably, is Kelsey. But other than that, it's pretty much Kittle. Obviously, that's going to be a connection that's there for an inexperienced quarterback.
Yeah, I think
Number
that,
2, one more before you go. The second thing that I think needs to be put in perspective is Debo isn't playing, right? So when Debo isn't playing, obviously Kittle moves up on the option list, and I think that's playing a role, right? As far as why Kittle's getting more opportunities, why we're seeing him score more touchdowns. So more than I think there's just a connection between Purdy and Kittle. I just think it's Purdy being more willing to throw to the tight end because it's the easiest read, and Kittle having more opportunities naturally because Debo is injured right now.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. Purdy, Kittle, good relationship so far. I think the point that you brought up about Debo Samuel is important. Why? Last week against the Seattle Seahawks, the 49ers receiving core arguably had their worst game of the year in terms of production. I think Juwan Jennings led the group with 33 receiving yards. They struggled. They struggled not only to get open, they struggled to make plays in general without Deebo Samuel in that adjustment period. The guy who really stood out was George Kittle. Kittle had 93 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 catches. He was the guy who was essentially the guy, and Kyle Shanahan did a good job of scheming him open and getting him open. I do think the influx of targets for throughout the 49er receiving core does impact Kittle's productivity and usage. But last 2 games, Kittle has kind of been one of the top options, if not the top option, and he's produced in both games. Now, I do think that one part of it is Jimmy Garoppolo. I do think that Jimmy Garoppolo has struggled to sometimes get Kittle the ball when Kittle should get the ball, and also thrown into double coverage when Kittle has the ball. And so when you throw into double coverage, you become a little less wary of throwing that football, even if it's open, because of the mistake you've made before. And so he's made the mistake of not throwing to Kittle when open, but also throwing to Kittle in double coverage, which has led to turnover-worthy plays. And so to me, I do think it's more so of a fact of maybe more opportunity, but also he's getting open, factor to him and to Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah. And I gotta stand up for my boy Ayuk, because you're throwing some shade at the wide receivers right now, saying that they're not getting open. Ayuk's been having some pretty damn good games these last few games.
No, he had a good year. It's just not his best game, I'd say, against Seattle. He's obviously had a good year though. Yeah. But more on the Purdy talk. Purdy's aggressive, makes good decisions. Kyle Shanahan's likes that. You can't teach that. Kind of thoughts on this real quick?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Purdy is a decisive quarterback. He doesn't seem like he's trying to figure out where he's taking the easier. And look, he's even a quarterback that seems like he goes through his progressions pretty quickly. And like we both mentioned, his mobility buys him time. So like his ability to get out of the pocket, his ability to buy himself some time, I think gives him that option to get to the next read or make maybe a little bit bigger of a pass. And he's not doing anything like any kind of like wow factor. Like you're not seeing him throw behind the back passes like Mahomes or, nearly like on the ground and throwing passes. He's just playing within his ability, playing to his strengths. He's taking what the defense is giving him. And when you have a defense, the quality of what the 49ers are, that's what you want your quarterback on the opposite side of that defense to do. Just don't put the defense in bad situations. Don't just get out of the defense's way of giving you everything you need to win. And, props to Purdy for being able to do that. With all due respect to Jimmy, I think he was doing a really good job of that as well. Like it's not that Jimmy wasn't, Jimmy was playing much safer style of ball. The offense was still putting up, fairly good points. And, I just think that overall this team is clicking on a lot of high cylinders. And, most teams, when they go to their third string quarterback, that's season over. And props to Brock Purdy for playing well enough to keep this streak going. And, he's galvanized a fan base that's been galvanized multiple times this season. So good for him. And, obviously he's making himself a big name, and it's going to be very interesting, Rohan, being on these streams with you this offseason when we know that the eventual Trey Lance, Brock Purdy debate is going to start up as far as who should be starting for the 49ers in 2023.
No, that'll definitely be a part of it. But going back to the offseason, because I was monitoring a lot this recent week on the aggression of Brock Purdy. I wrote an article today on how Purdy has benefited from the defense in from their defense's practice philosophy, which was essentially what they gave to Trey Lance. I'll drop it in the chat while I talk. But essentially what I talked about was how Jimmy Ward and members of the defense have publicly expressed the challenge they give to these young quarterbacks in practice. They want the quarterbacks to make these mistakes in practice. Be aggressive in practice. Don't be conservative in practice. Don't take the easy way out because that's the best way to figure out what you got. Unless so you don't have to go struggle on game day and figure out what you got on game day. That's what Purdy was doing. That's what Trey Lance was doing, which is why the excitement was there. And so I'm glad to see the 49ers carry over this defensive philosophy towards towards Brock Purdy from Trey Lance. And talking specifically about Kyle Shanahan, he said in the offseason that he preferred this aggressive type of quarterback. Now, aggressive doesn't mean reckless or careless. Aggressive just means the ability to, or at least the willingness to make those downfield throws while also to help stretch out this offense. Purdy has been doing that. That's a reason why when you see those statistics about maybe big time throw, turnover worthy throw, maybe the turnover worthy throw is a little higher because he is being a little more aggressive. And the decision making has been solid for the most part, which is why it's been a pretty solid game or pretty solid year for Brock Purdy in his rookie kind of campaign.
There's talks about him possibly being rookie of the year with his performance over the last.
I don't think you'll get it.
Well, there's to be honest. I mean, the funny thing is there's not like a bunch of rookies that are like running away with it. You know what I mean? Definitely not a rookie quarterback, right? Because I don't know if there's even a rookie quarterback that's even getting any playing time other than Brock Purdy at this point. But if he continues on this trajectory, right? They got what they have 2 more games. 2 more games. 2 more games. You know, that'll give him a solid 6 games of playing time. Who knows, man? The league is wild, and we know it's very much so a quarterback's league. So if Purdy continues to do this, and who knows, let's say the Eagles, you know, Hurts can't come back in time. Eagles drop, you know, the next 2 games, and you know Minnesota messes up one of these games, and the 49ers end up with the 1 seed. All of a sudden now, you know, it makes it more and more likely that maybe Mr. Irrelevant ends up becoming the rookie of the year. Can you imagine? Yeah. Like the movie is writing itself. The movie is writing itself. Mr. Irrelevant.
I don't think Purdy will. I think Garrett Wilson's going to win the award unless he gets injured over the next 2 games. I think he's probably the clear-cut favorite. I know odds books have him 1, and then I think Ken Walker 2, but Walker
has been injured most of the season.
Yeah, he's faced his injuries, and then Purdy is either 3 or 4. Christian Watson's up there too, so it's them 4. I think Wilson wins it, but I mean, just to even be in the race for only playing 4 games now, pretty impressive. You gotta tip your cap to what Brock Purdy's done. Moving forward, though, with some of the comments before we get on with the remainder of the program, real quick, JC asked, what are we ranked on defense for 3rd down conversions? Thought it was pretty bad. After this game, we are actually just right in the middle of the pack. We're 15th. We allow 38.9% of 3rd down conversions defensively, I believe. And another question here from JC, would you sit the starters in the Cardinals game if the 2 seed is in play / not in play? What's kind of your thought process on this? This wasn't on the docket, but this is a good topic.
I think it depends on which starters. I think that Brock Purdy has to play. I think the more reps that you give a young quarterback is way more important than anything else. I think that it's a game where the way the Cardinals are playing, the 49ers could have it all locked up by, you know, mid-3rd quarter, you know what I mean? And then you could you know, sit all the starters and kind of just ride it out. Especially I think Arizona's starting their 3rd or 4th string quarterback. And let me tell you, their 3rd string quarterback ain't no Brock Purdy. So I don't know. I think that there's pros and cons to sitting your starters. We've seen it happen. I remember, you know, the year that Indy were almost like undefeated. They ended up sitting their starters the last game, even though they had everything locked up, and then they struggled in the playoffs because of you know, rust and all that kind of stuff. So to me, I'd rather, obviously I know this, the thing is like keep them as healthy as possible. But for me, I think being a hot team, is important. And especially when you have the type of momentum that the 49ers are having with the win streak and all that kind of stuff, I say keep it going, man, because usually the teams that win win the Super Bowl are usually the hottest teams, not always necessarily quote unquote the best team, right? So I would rather be a hot team than just kind of hope that we're the healthiest team or the best team type of thing.
I think that's fair. If the two seeds in reach, you do play your players. I think if the two seeds in reach, it's vital. Why? Because the 49ers, they best experienced it last year. They had to go on the road, not once, but twice. I know the last one was at Levi South, but they had to go on the road twice. And that does it's grueling. Not only do you have to do the travel schedule, which alters your practice schedule going into the game, you've got to do the rest recovery and all that, and then not play at home. Two straight home games would be huge for the 49ers, especially in that recovery pattern or recovery time at the end of the year. And so I think you do play it if the two seeds in play. Now, if the two seeds not in play, I do think Kyle Shanahan will sit his starters. I believe he's been a guy who's expressed belief that he would sit his starters if that was a case. Now, I don't know. I don't know if I envision a scenario in which the two seed isn't in play, though, going up to that time, because I don't expect the 49ers to lose this weekend against the Las Vegas Raiders. The only way the two seed would not be in play is if the 49ers lost this weekend. If they
Right.
won and if the Vikings won, then both teams could play for the two seed still. And then going into that next week, you essentially are banking on a win and a Vikings loss for that two seed to be out of play. So I expect the 49ers to be playing their starters regardless, because the likelihood of the two seeds still being in play. But like Suneil said, Cardinals, if we're being honest, are not good. So there's a good chance that you can rest your starters at the fourth quarter, if with the way the game should go out.
Yeah, and Minnesota's game this week is against Green Bay, and Green Bay
Yeah,
is very much so a team that is hot as well, right? They're on a little bit of a
they're
win
on a good
streak.
win streak right now.
They
Yeah.
also are like playing for something. So
Hmm.
to me, and look, Minnesota has hands off to them for being resilient, but they came back against two teams that the Giants, I guess you could say, are pretty solid, but the Indy game was ridiculous, and obviously Indianapolis is not a good team at this point. So I don't know if you could do that. How much can you do that 3 games in a row, kind of without playing necessarily your best brand of football? I think if they come out the same way they came out against Indy, came out against the Giants, I think the Packers could definitely get them there. So the 49ers and Minnesota could be tied as far as record at the end of this week. And I think I think it goes to conference record after that if there's a tie.
Yeah.
And I think the 49ers have that over Minnesota. So they would be the 2
Yeah.
seed.
Exactly. So essentially, if Minnesota loses one and 49ers win out, they're the two seed. That's how it plays out. So you kind of do bank that Minnesota loses this game because they face Chicago the week after. But anything's possible in the NFL. We've seen that. We've seen some historic collapses too. But moving forward, one area of struggle for the 49ers this past game, the red zone. I think they only converted 3 of their opportunities. I think they had 5. They only converted 3. Struggled in the first half. They went down. They went down on downs in the first half and didn't convert again, I believe, later. What are your thoughts on the red zone struggles, given that they've been an issue? Are you concerned going into the playoffs, or do you think with the way the 49ers have played offensively that they have done a good job of kind of combating that issue?
I mean, once again, we got to put things in perspective. There were touchdowns that were dropped by receivers throughout this kind of red zone struggle type thing. Where I remember Ayuk dropped a touchdown, and there were just some plays where definitely some things could have been touchdowns. But I kind of think that as far as the red zone struggles, this is where I would put a little bit of blame on Kyle Shanahan, because I do think he gets a little bit vanilla when it comes to the red zone. He obviously sticks with the run, but I think it's just kind of he could get a little bit more creative, or give maybe a few more shots passing the ball versus just on third down passing the ball. It seems like each red zone possession is run the ball, and then try to get it through the air. Maybe switch it up a little bit. Maybe this could definitely be feelings over facts because I haven't like necessarily broke down and watched the film to see exactly what those plays have been called. But to me, I think from the sense that I got, it's more little bit maybe lack of play calling. I think is a little bit could be better there in the red zone. And then I think that the 49ers, whether it be Ayuk, whether it be Jennings, that guy that could just get up and get the ball in the end zone, right? A little like we haven't really seen that fade that you see some of these elite wide receivers do, whether it be Devontae Adams, whether it be a DK Metcalf, or a receiver like Kelsey does for Mahomes, where you just kind of throw it up there to your guy and just one-on-one on the outside and go up there and out jump the corner and get the ball. I think it would be nice to see a few of those plays every now and then. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's more execution, or do you think that Kyle Shanahan is just hiding his bag till the playoffs type of thing?
No, I 100% think it's execution. I think you did nail it. Execution has been the issue. There have been some poor play calls. I think Kyle Shanahan has had his worst set of play calling in the red zone. I think everywhere else, Kyle Shanahan has done a very good job this year overall. I think red zone, though, he has struggled at times. And remember, the red zone, it's a short set of plays. It's not necessarily a huge sample size. So a couple of plays does skew the results. But I do think the 49ers have had issues in the red zone. Now, the one thing I will say is in the playoffs, it doesn't matter. The red zone is just you get an opportunity, you got to convert. It's kind of like that. So to me, I do think that some of the issues with the red zone is inconsistency. You've just got to be able to execute on the day that the playoffs are. That kind of thing. Got to remain disciplined. That's my main talk. But I do think it's mainly execution rather than an issue with the play, or not necessarily play calling, but like a concurrent issue that's going on there.
Hey man, you know better than I when it comes to this stuff.
Okay, last topic of the day, toughest topic of the day, because I don't know how many concerns there are with this 49ers roster, but offense, defense, name me one concern that you kind of see on either side.
So the one concern that I see, and I don't know if it's so much roster, it could be roster, but obviously there's no solution for it right now. And the 49ers seem to have an Achilles heel on defense. And the reason why it's a little bit scary is it plays into how you want the 49ers to play, right? So we obviously know the strength of this defense is its pass rush. So you want to force the opposing offense to throw the ball as much as possible. And the 49ers do a really good job of that, being the number one rushing defense in the league, right? These cornerbacks are doing an amazing job, stopping the run. The linebackers are doing their job stopping the run, and obviously the defensive line is holding their own when it comes to that as well. So they have turned teams into forcing to throw the ball more. And for the most part, if it's like just normal, big, strong receivers, the 49ers do an amazing job. Charvarius Ward is going to lock up, that style of receiver. And Lenore does a pretty decent job on those type of receivers. Ward does pretty decent job on those type of receivers. And we see Hufanga kind of balling out and being the disruptor there, and Gibson and all those guys playing well. The problem becomes those quick, shifty, fast receivers tend to have really good games against the 49ers because Lenore, Ward, Hufanga,
Right.
even Charvarius Ward at times have trouble dealing with quickness and speed. And those seem to be the receivers that can get behind the secondary and wreak havoc. We saw it just, that's the reason why Washington was able to score, right? Jahan Dotson, McLaurin, both quick, shifty, fast receivers. They kind of were able to go out there and have pretty good games with the quarterback in Heineke, who maybe isn't a world beater, but was able to buy time on certain plays and be able to give their receivers enough time to get behind that. And Hufanga struggles when it comes to that. Lenore has gotten beat a few times. We've seen Ward have some struggles there when it comes to coverage on those type of receivers. So for me, that's the Achilles heel, Rohan. And obviously, the more you start playing better offenses, the more they have an option like that. So if
Yeah.
this defensive line can't get to the quarterback, or the quarterback is able to buy a little bit of time, that's where the 49ers are susceptible in the secondary to that style of receiver.
I think that's a very fair point because that's actually very similar to my concern specifically on defense. My concern is if the 49ers lose Charvarius Ward to any sort of time. We've seen Ward exit the game on several occasions this year. He also has had not an injury history, but an affinity of missing a few games a year. And I think we've seen every single time he's exited the issues that stem from Ward missing that time. Go back to the Falcons game when Ward missed time with a groin injury. What happened immediately? Samuel Womack comes in. The defense picks on Samuel Womack. Now, is the issue primarily Samuel Womack? No, it's not necessarily always the depth, but now there has to be an increased communication between the depth and the safeties. We saw in this past game, Ward goes out for a couple of plays. What happens? Samuel Womack comes in. And what do? They test Womack and Hufanga. They go straight deep McLaurin on Womack. And Gibson gets caught in no man's land real quick. He essentially tries to cover the crosser route going to the far side of the field away from him, which is Hufanga's responsibility, instead of covering the one-on-one with McLaurin. McLaurin beats Womack, and that's a quick 60-yard play. In the playoffs, you only need one of those plays to have one good drive. And so that's my issue. That's not my issue, but that's my concern going to the playoffs. Now, you hope Ward stays healthy. You hope nothing happens. But if that does happen, I think that would be an area of concern that the 49ers have yet to address thus far, based on when they've come in, when the help has come in, and what's gone on with the help when they've come in. Now, offensively, I will say one thing. I probably will go with the offensive line. Can they sustain against better defensive lines? We've seen them play really elite defensive lines only a couple of times this year. I'd say the Kansas City Chiefs, that was one of the better ones they faced, and also this past game against the Washington Commanders. They could not run the football against Washington. They averaged only 3.3 yards per carry, heavily skewed because Ray McCloud had a 71-yard touchdown on one play. Overall, can they do better? Because they sometimes do struggle to win at the line of scrimmage, push the line of scrimmage back against a better defensive line. In the playoffs, you face strong teams. You face strong opponents. You're going to face a strong defensive line. You talk about Philly. You talk about Dallas, the top teams in the conference. Even Minnesota has a strong defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
All those teams could give the 49ers fits. Purdy's athleticism helps you potentially in pass protection a little bit, but even he took 3 sacks this past game. That's one of my main concerns because you don't want 2nd and 20. You don't want 3rd and 15. You don't want those longer plays that kill drives because to me, a sack is essentially a penalty. It's a drive killer.
Yeah. And you mentioned another defense that has a pretty decent defensive line in the Saints, and the 49ers were only able to put up 13 points. And the game that they played against a good defensive line and they played well, which was Tampa Bay, their star.
It's because Vita Vea went out.
Yeah, Vita Vea went out early. So that is a good point. I think the only thing where I think that's going to be not as big of a deal is because the 49ers are just so loaded. When Debo comes back, when, obviously Kittle's there, Ayuk, you can manufacture yards, even if the rushing game isn't there. And even, where before you were able to stop the run and the running back is just taken out of the game, CMC is still a net positive when it comes to the passing game as well. So you're still going to be able to utilize your running back and your weapons there. So I think that's a little bit, I think that's not going to be as big of an issue moving forward, where that secondary thing for sure. And you said if Ward goes down, obviously that's worst case scenario because he's, our only true legit starting ace cornerback. But even sometimes when he's in there, Rohan, I don't know. You can tell me, how do you think that the secondary, even when healthy, with let's say the starters that are now here, obviously Mosley is gone for the year. How do you think that this secondary deals with speed?
It depends. It depends on the coverage that they put out. I think that when Charvarius Ward has been tested when healthy, he's done a good job. I don't think that that's the issue. The issue to me with the defense in terms of covering speed is when it comes to zone coverage, can every player in that back end be on the same page? When you go back to the Miami Dolphins game, it's a blown coverage that leads to a touchdown with Tyreek Hill. It's things like that. I think that that's where you worry when it's zone coverage, when they have to rely on one another. Can each player kind of have the correct responsibility and do their job, and can they communicate well enough?
And my answer to that is no. We're seeing consistently that they can't. And they can when it comes to just regular receivers, you know what I mean? But when it comes to speed, seems to where if there's speed on the other side, eventually they're going to play zone. They're not going to be able to play man the whole game. Like that's just impossible. And it seems like to me, and once again, this is feelings over facts. So you probably have some stats that can negate this, but to me, I've seen if there's speed on the other side, that's when you are seeing these blown coverages consistently, right? No matter who's out there, even if Ward's out there, somewhere Hufunga is, and somebody we're off, and usually it seems like it's Lenore and Hufunga or Lenore and somebody where that kind of happened. And to me, that's going to be something where the 49ers can be it's just like those lead to momentum changing plays that the 49ers can be doing everything right. And like you mentioned, just one of these plays that changes the momentum. And all of a sudden now something that was looking like an easy victory is turning into a dogfight. And you wonder, how good is Brock Purdy going to be when everything's on the line right now? He's played with a lot of leads. There hasn't been any comebacks. There hasn't been any kind of real, tough moments where we're looking at him and being like, what is this guy made of? Like, he's played with leads. He's played in games where, most of the games have been blowouts. Knock on wood. Hopefully it's always like that. But usually it's not in the playoffs. The games get tighter. The games get closer. How good is his execution going to be when everything's on the line,
I think that's fair. Yeah, I do think that's fair. A lot of valid concerns, especially, the experience of Purdy, because the track record for first-year quarterbacks in the playoffs or first-time quarterbacks in the playoffs, not very high, right? So we'll see how it goes. But Sunil, it's been a great show. I obviously appreciate anytime you come on. It's always a great time. But the chat as well. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great, just a lively chat today. Something I very much appreciate for all of you. Have a happy holidays to all of y'all. Any last thoughts, Neil?
Yeah, just wanted to shout out some people that came on last minute. Obviously, Ryan, Wanda, haven't seen you guys in some time, so appreciate you guys jumping in. John V, appreciate you guys, and I do want to say one last thing, Rohan. This is my first time on your channel since you've hit 1,000 subscribers. So want to say congratulations. Obviously, I did it privately to you when it happened, but definitely want to say congratulations to you guys. If you aren't subscribed to Rohan, make sure you go do that. This guy hasn't been as consistent, just like me. We both haven't been the most consistent in streaming.
It's because
life takes us elsewhere. But when he is on doing his stuff, one of the best in my book. That's why I always want to work with him as much as possible. So definitely go subscribe to him. If you aren't subscribed to me, some of Rohan's fans, please do that as well. I look to be more consistent as well. And happy holidays. Hope everybody's new year is safe and the year upcoming is more success for both the Niners and our own personal lives.
100%. Amen to that. Guys, have a good day, and we'll see you guys next time.